Hi, my name is Seamus and welcome to Finchfield Fix. This is Finchfield House, built in the 1860s as an Italianate Victorian. My wife Kate and I purchased the house back in 2016. Over the years I've learned a lot about restoring old homes and I'm going to share that knowledge with you right here on this channel. Today we're going to talk about plaster walls, how they're constructed and how you can tint your own plaster walls on a budget. If you own a pre-war home, chances are your walls were constructed something like this. Typically the wood for a home was milled on site. So this is called wooden lath, and in this particular case, because we're in upstate New York, this is made from hemlock, and hemlock's a weird wood. It's a soft wood that thinks it's a hardwood, so it's perfect for this application. And the lath was put on and there was a gap in between, and the gap is for what we call a key, and the key holds the plaster onto the wood lath. And if you look closely, you'll be able to see that back in the day they used horsehair as a binder. It really gave a lot of strength to the plaster. But today, ox hair is a little more available. This is the base coat, the brown coat, the scratch coat. Depending on where you live in the world, it's named many different things. But this is the first coat that we put on the wall. And that's what all of these walls look like behind me before I put the finished coat on. Now, normally I use a company called Plaster, and they can pretty much custom tint any color for me that I need. But today, I'm going to show you how to custom tint your own color on a budget. So here are some of the tools and materials you're going to need to complete the plaster project. A floor protection, in this case I use Guardia floor protection. Then from left to right, some various sizes of taping knives. The square metal piece is called a hock, or you could use a trough, a metal trough. Then a drill to mix your plaster. Paint obviously for the color. Paintbrush, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Plaster, I'm using a powder plaster because it's a small patch. But if you're using plaster for an entire wall or an entire room, I would recommend buying 5 gallons of joint compound and then blending paint through that. Some disposable gloves and a utility knife. So before we start this project, we have to move Bristlebutt's clothes and his tools. Bristlebutt is a leprechaun and a cobbler, and he happens to reside here at Finchfield House. So this is the issue that we're dealing with here. Some of the plaster has, and you can see it's just falling off here. So we're going to remove the plaster. I'm going to show you how to custom tint some plaster, and then we're going to put it on the wall. We suspect that this plaster is crumbling off the wall because there used to be wallpaper behind it, and some of the residue from the wallpaper may not have been completely removed. So this is why we're addressing this today. Just take off enough plaster until you start to find some solid plaster that's not crumbling. As this is such a small patch, I'm using a powdered form of 45-minute plaster, and as its name suggests, it hardens in about 45 minutes, so it's going to set up on you really quick. So if you're not familiar with plastering and this is your first attempt, I would recommend buying a 5 gallon of a joint compound, and then you can blend the paint through that instead. If you do use a 45-minute plaster, take your time, add small amounts of water as you blend, until you get the consistency somewhere between peanut butter and mayonnaise. So here's a good little tip for you. When you get the consistency that you're looking for, put some of the plaster onto your taping knife and then take it back off again. And when you put it back on, it's going to bond to the blade, and so you're not going to have a mess on your hands with plaster falling all over the floor and all over yourself. Take a time when you're applying the plaster to the wall and make sure you keep your tools really clean. It's very important because you can get a little bit of grit or dirt into the finished plaster, and if that does happen, don't be afraid to pick it out with the side of your taping knife. Now, the one thing we haven't really mentioned yet is the paintbrush, and when you're satisfied with the finish and it's dried to the touch, put a little water on your paintbrush and flick it onto the plaster, and then very quickly skim it with your taping knife, and that'll give you a polished fine finish. Now that coat's dry, and you'll notice that we have a two-tone pink wall in this room. So it's time to apply a second coat, but this time we're going to use a lighter colored pink. Okay, so the patch has been repaired and it's time to hang the paintings, and let's take a look at the room. don't be afraid to experiment with your plaster colours. In this room we have a malachite style finish and even a mustard finish in another room. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and if there's anything you'd like to see me fix, please leave a comment below, and I'll see you next time on Finchfield Fix.